guys, it's Leanna from PrimaGames.com, and get ready to hate my guts because we're doing an edition of Unpopular Opinions. This is not a random video, although it's going to seem like it, especially since the Game of Question has been long since released. But one of the most common questions we get both on Prima socials and my own socials has to do with one of my opinions that gets a lot of flack. I've even gotten death threats over it. Stay classy, internet. Is why I think Dragon Age 2 is such a good game. Told ya, it's a very unpopular opinion. And you might hate me after this, but hear me out for a second. So, for anybody that's followed my socials or my previous work, you know that despite giving it a negative review, I personally really enjoyed Dragon Age 2. I think it has some of the best character development in any game over the last 15 years. And there's a lot of nuance that was lost because of, unfortunately, it was very repetitive with its dungeon environments. It was very repetitive in terms of NPC interactions. And unfortunately, a lot of people felt like it was rushed, and it was, and it wasn't at the same time. So a lot of times people ask, the few times that we've mentioned this on Prima socials, and the many times, obviously I have BioWare tattoos, I'm huge into BioWare. A big thing I get asked is, why? Why is this the hill you're willing to die on? And it's hard to really explain in the 240 character limit on Twitter, so figured we would do it in video format instead. So we're diving in. So a couple things that I'm going to talk about in Dragon Age 2 relation is how the character development is great, how Anders' arc made perfect sense, why Fenris is very, very, very underrated, and a few other surprises as well. So, disclaimer, I am not pardoning the obvious issues that Dragon Age 2 has. The dungeons going into the same cave that's a different cave every 15 minutes was very boring. There's a lot of issues, structural issues, mechanic issues that Dragon Age 2 had. It was a very different feeling also from Dragon Age Inquisition and also Dragon Age Origins and Awakening, which also led into a lot of the backlash as well, because when Dragon Age 2 was announced, we were expecting a continuation of Origins, and though it did continue it and led perfectly into Inquisition, it felt very much like a different game. Also, another disclaimer. Disclaimers are fun, kids. When I first played Dragon Age 2, I hated it. And there's a reason why I hated it. Because it is very, unlike Dragon Age Origins, it is very built around one particular character arc, which for an RPG, that's not something you usually want to corner yourself into because people want to see themselves in their characters and they want to build a hero of their dreams. So the first time I played as female Hawk, which, as I often do in RPGs, I love playing women. Why not? I'm a woman. I like seeing myself in the games. I like to be able to lose myself in the games. So I played a female Hawk rogue, which rogues, again, in RPGs are usually my go-to class, and I played blue. So for those that have not played yet, and if you haven't, I'm very sorry because there's going to be massive spoilers in this video, there's 3 different character personalities you can choose from when playing your Hawk. You can be red, which is ruthless, warrior, rah, angry noises, and cut your shenanigans, kids, get off my lawn. And then there's the blue, which is diplomatic. It's fair, just. That's funny. Fair, just, and is a diplomat. And I wanted, coming off, especially Mass Effect, where you have the Paragon Renegade, I wanted to be the good guy. So I went blue. But then there's purple, and purple is the gym. That's the key to liking Dragon Age 2, is play Purple Hawk. Any other Hawk is wrong. They're just wrong. There is so much more content that gets delivered when you play a Purple Hawk, and it's so funny and engaging that if you're not playing Purple Hawk, or you don't play Purple Hawk at least once, you're doing yourself a massive disservice. That being said, so I played 3 things that I should have on paper resonated with, and just that path did not click well with me in my playthrough. But I was hoping it would get better, and I beat it. I have a hard time leaving games unbeaten. It bothers me. So I was like, oh, I'll beat it, whatever. And I remember being like, wow, that was really short, and I don't feel connected to this like I did with Origins, which broke my heart. But I'm a completionist, and I have faith in BioWare, and I was interested in the little throwbacks that it gave to the first game, especially seeing Isabella, especially, meeting Sebastian, and learning a little bit more about Lothering through the eyes of people outside of the Dragon Age Origins universe. It was very interesting, and so I wanted to do another playthrough. So this time I played a female Hawk mage, And instantly, it was much better. And I dabbled. I still couldn't completely reject my blue ways. So I dabbled in the purple, but mostly stayed to the blue path. And I romanced Anders instead of Meryl, which was my first romance. And I liked it a little bit better. There were scenes that I didn't have before and choices I didn't make before that drastically changed how I saw characters and how characters saw me. So I liked it a little bit better, but still didn't get that obsession, because even though the Dragon Age 2 fandom is a lot smaller than Dragon Age Origins fandom, it is very passionate, and I just wasn't getting that fire that I was seeing from other people. And usually when I do that, instead of being like, this game sucks, I try to go in and be like, okay, let me readjust my mindset. Do I have unfair expectations going in, and am I not understanding a character motive correctly? Because sometimes you do have to shift your perception a little bit, especially if it's not what you were expecting. So I did that, and I liked it a little bit better. But I really, really, really liked Fenris, but I kept pissing him off. And I ended up romancing Anders by mistake. I was romancing both of them, but with Fenris, you have to be 100%. You either have to be 100% rivalmance or 100% friendship in order to get his full romance, where you get that makeout session at the end of the game, because butterflies. Plus that voice. Oh my god. But anyway, so I ended up doing him, but I remember being like, I really want to romance Fenris. So I did something completely different. I made a mage, male Hawk, and he was 100% purple, even when it was really inappropriate. Like, Hawk, now's not the time to be making jokes, dude. And it made the world of a difference. This was the playthrough that, for me, clicked. I romanced Fenris that playthrough, got 100%. I did cheat a little bit and look up Prima Games guides. No regrets. But I did, that was a turning point for me. I now unlocked a lot of dialogue I didn't have before with Fenris, which showed nuance between him and Anders, which in fanfiction, everybody likes to paint Fenris as this really angry, character, and he's not. He very rarely ever raises his voice. There's a few moments where he flips, but if you look in the context, he face to face with his tormentor. Of course he's gonna lose his shit. But for those that may not know Fenris is an escaped slave from Tevinter. Tevinter in the Dragon Age universe is a very, 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 very bad place, filled with blood mages, blood magic, and mages hungry on power and raw. And everything bad comes from Tevinter, and everything wrong with the world is because of Tevinter. So then we now have Fenris, who is an escaped slave, which slavery is a big staple of Tevinter society. He's not only that, but he's also an elf. And in Thedas, not just Tevinter, in all of Thedas, elves are seen as very subhuman. They are the dirt on our shoes. If they're a Dalish elf, they're savages that need to be put down. If they are city elves, they're too poor and good for slave trade and doing your dirty work for you. So he is an escaped slave who lost everything. And he comes, it's very alluded to that Daenerys had a non-consensual sexual relationship with him, especially in the confrontation when we get to meet Daenerys. There's also subtext found in lore throughout the game as well. But even if you want to ignore that, there was definite physical abuse. He also had lyrium, which is a substance that connects mages to the Fade better and amplifies their magic. It's very poisonous, very lethal. And he had lyrium tattoos embedded into his skin. And this procedure has killed many elves before Fenris, killed elves after him, but for some reason he was able to survive, though it erased his memories and he was in basically pain all the time. So you have an in-pain elf who is experiencing freedom for the first time. It's terrifying. And he's escaping from a master that he knows wants him dead. And so this is kind of the arc that he goes over. So when we meet him, he's very not trustful, he's very hesitant, very gruff to the point. And that's the first impression we have of him. What we get to learn later, and I really got to explore in detail when I romanced him, was he's funny and he's eloquent and he is a master of many languages, including the Qun. And he is also, he's got a very dry humor and he knows how to adapt, which is something that you wouldn't expect, and something a lot of fan fictions I've noticed and blog posts about this character seem to miss the mark on. He's only angry about 10% of the game. He even admits when he's wrong with Anders, when he says something that accidentally triggers Anders into thinking he's getting bullied again because they have a very bad relationship with each other. Anders wants all freedom for all mages. Fenris, he was tormented by mages for his entire life, so he has locked them all up. And Fenris grows and he realizes it's not all mages. Versus Anders, he pivots down, but we're going to go into that a little bit detail in a little bit later. But it was something that really showed a light on a character that my first 2 playthroughs I didn't have. And so I'm like, well, if I had those reactions where I didn't really get to see the full picture until this many, there's a lot of people that don't like to play the same game more than once. They know the ending, they're done, they're ready to move on. So that's their first impression. If they built the character that wasn't in line with what Dragon Age has to offer, especially specifically Dragon Age 2, then that's their impression of Dragon Age 2. But it had incredible character development. Now, with Dragon Age 2, if you play your Hawk, whether male or female, your sibling that survives, again, spoiler, is heavily dependent upon your class. If you play a mage, then you're going to have Carver. If you play anything but a mage, you're going to have Bethany. Bethany is very sweet. Everybody loves her, very docile. Carver's kind of an ass, but he's your ass. You know what I mean? Like, he's the guy that you want to strangle, but like nobody else is allowed to strangle him. But the one thing that it was interesting for me is when I first played Mage, I got to experience Carver for the first time, and I hated him. I absolutely despised everything he said, everything that came out of his mouth. He was so volatile. But there were moments where he would really dig into Garrett, like B or Marion, whichever Hawk you choose, really dig into that Hawk character of, you don't know me, I'm tired of being in your shadow. But then there's other moments where he was there no matter what. And especially when Fenris makes a remark about Hawk being a mage, Carver stands up for him without a second thought. And it's interesting too because there's a big arc at the end of Act 1 where you can choose to take Carver with you to the Deep Roads, or you can leave him behind. If you leave him behind, he then becomes a Templar, which as a mage, that's instantly should read as, oh my god, he just betrayed my family. In actuality, there's correspondence you see via letter. You actually get to see Carver a couple more times throughout the game's progression, even though he's no longer a party member. And it's in those moments that you see that he chose that path, one, to get out of Garrett or Marion's shadow, but also as a last-ditch effort to protect the remaining bits of his family after their father passed away, and eventually the mother passes away tragically by the hands of Blood Mage Baidu as well. And so there's that nuance that you have to dig for. Like, you have to basically keep your eyes wide open the entire time, which again, for a game that is deceptively simple as Dragon Age 2, it's the same dungeon over and over again. So people are not going to be looking for nuance because that's going to register as that's lazy design. So if they're lazy in design, they're going to be lazy in the writing too, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. We saw the character growth with Fenris. We saw the character growth with Isabella. Isabella, we first met her in Dragon Age Origins in a brothel. Then we meet her again, and she's va-va-voom everywhere, but she owns it. She's a true feminist icon. She knows her worth. She knows what she's capable of, and she knows loyalty. And we get to see a side of Isabella that, even though she's got this very selfish facade, we get to see a side of her that is anything but selfish, and that is very apparent with the act that includes the Qunari invasion, with coming back from the book, even though she didn't have to. Also, when we find out why she was shipwrecked at the beginning, was trying to purposely dilute a slave trade transaction going on because it went against her beliefs. And that's something that is awesome. And especially if you romance this character, she's a big mushball, but she never loses. She can be mushy, but she never loses her power, which I think is incredible. Then you've got Meryl, who's the sweetheart. But the thing with her, she's a giant juxtaposition as well. You have everything we've been taught in Dragon Age is blood mages are evil. They're going to turn into abominations. They're going to accept a demon into them. They're going to get possessed, and they're going to turn into this murderous rampage. And then we have Meryl, who's a blood mage, who literally couldn't hurt a butterfly. Couldn't hurt anything. Never in a million years wants to hurt anything. But then how is she a blood mage? And that is something that is very interesting. And then with Anders being a mage, an escaped mage, who is very, all mages deserve freedom, for him to critique her choices is an interesting character development between the two as well, because now it's showing, it's not black and white. Nobody in Dragon Age 2 has a black and white narrative. None of them. And it's very interesting because that's where you get the magic. That's, no pun intended, but that's where you get the magic of these characters, is they're not necessarily by themselves, but their interactions with each other, changing up the party, changing of the party depending on the mission. All of that, you get to see sides of characters that you might not have seen before if you didn't make those same choices, meaning every playthrough is going to have something that you did not experience before. I can say Dragon Age 2, I have 19 playthroughs, and I think I only have 2 that ever were exactly alike, and that was because I did that very purposely. How you handle NPCs, who gets kidnapped, who dies, who lives, who, it all can change. And I think there's a real power to that, despite its repetitious environments, that deserves some respect and deserves commendation. Change a little bit, I think. My battery actually died halfway through, so yay technology. Thanks for that. It's great. So anyways, we're talking about how characters relate to each other and how that really adds to a nuance that I think a lot of people miss from Dragon Age 2. Another one that I really like is, so a big complaint I see about Dragon Age 2 is, that goddamn it Anders moment at the end, and everybody says, that's so out of character. But is it really? Now, if you look at Origins and then Awakening is actually the expansion that Anders was first introduced, although he was under a different voice actor who was actually the same man that voices Cullen. Obviously, that changed to Dragon Age 2, though the difference wasn't totally obvious, but a lot of people are attributing that to the reason why it felt off. But the thing is, so here's the introduction for those that may not know, and here's why I think Anders' arc actually made perfect sense and why his interactions with Fenris is probably one of the most important ones that we've seen thus far. So, when we first met Anders in Awakening, he was an escaped mage from the Circle, one of the most dangerous circles, and actually the circle that was hit the hardest with the Blight. When we meet him, he's sarcastic, he's escaped, he's proud that he's escaped, but he hides a lot of his fear and a lot of his confusion behind that humor, that saucy humor. And instead of being the one uncomfortable, he kind of likes to make other people uncomfortable with overt sexual overtures, especially when Nathaniel says numerous times that he kind of makes him uncomfortable. The flirting gets kicked up a little bit. That's like almost a defense mechanism for him. And one of his big arcs is, even though he remains funny the entire Awakening, he does kind of get a little bit more subdued and more self-reflective. That was a weird word to say together, apparently, which you really see evident when you have him paired in the same party with Nathaniel Howell. You see a lot of that introspection, which then leads to, of course, what we all know about him taking the spirit of justice into him. So remember how I said that how abominations and possession is a big no-no in Dragon Age? Obviously, that didn't happen with Anders. He didn't turn into this big, ugly abomination that lost all sense of self. He actually became more in tune to what he wants to do in contribution to society, as well as the bigger picture. Justice then kind of gets into his head a little bit of, look, you have a place of privilege, you've escaped, you're under the protection of the Wardens, which eventually stops when he's attacked and kills all of them. So nice guy Anders. That is not actually in the game. That is something that is referenced post-game in the credits, and then also something that is referenced a little bit in the comics as well. But this is something that was a very big turning point for this character. He less reliant on humor, though the humor is still there, though it dwindles throughout the acts in Dragon Age 2. He's becoming more aware that he needs a place in the society. He's no longer a mage trapped in a tower, so who is he? So he is now championing for the rights of mages everywhere. But the thing is justice, both as a character and as a virtue, is just that. It's a virtue. They're not meant to be rooted in gray areas, and humanity, human progression, human evolution, human societal adaptation, it's all one giant gray area. So when you have a character that doesn't know how to operate within gray areas, now living succinctly in one, you're gonna have some weird character side effects, and that's what we see in Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age 2, we see Anders make those jokes, make those flirty little innuendos, and you can actually romance him as well, which I did enjoy his romance after I knew everything that went down, because it let me see some, again, those subtle nuances. Can you tell I like nuances? Because I do. Anyways, so the one thing that I felt like really made sense of why the whole ending of Dragon Age 2 made completely sense for this character is you see the downhill spiral. So Kirkwall is basically Thetis' version of being built on a burial ground. A lot of nasty crap goes down. We've got blood mages, we've got corrupt politics, we've got pillaging, we've got murder, we've got rape, we've got Canary invasions. We have everything that could make it bad, and then it's made even worse. So we have Anders, who is now not just Anders, but he's also Justice. He comes to Kirkwall and starts his journey in a new place with a place of tumult. Like, he is not okay. We actually meet him. So we meet him looking for maps for the Deep Roads for Big Expedition, which is the whole setup of Act 1 going into Act 2. But what is interesting is the fact that he's like, okay, I'll help you, but you have to help me first. And this is where we see like the real ramifications of how the circles run in this fictional universe. Now he comes face to face with Carl, who is his lover and his first love in the circle. When some correspondence between him and Carl are found, the Templars then, as punishment, make him tranquil, and this is obviously after his escape as well, so possibly a punishment towards his escape as well. In addition to that, and when he goes all justicey, rah, blue glow, that connection to the Fate actually opens and breaks that tranquility momentarily, and that's when Carl says, I love you, but this isn't me, this isn't a life, please kill me. He does this act of mercy, but that is hard. You're killing the person you love because you see it as a mercy over what Templars have done, which sets up also the tone between him and Fenris, who are two sides of the same coin, both sides very oppressed, a lot in common, but on opposite spectrums. Fenris's life was made hell by mages. Anders is a mage whose life was made hell by non-mages. So you've got that juxtaposition there that really fits nicely and has a lot of intricate moments that, again, I didn't catch a lot of them until I've done a couple of playthroughs. So we now have Justice and Anders. Anders, the good funny boy, is now dealing with some major tragedy, and he's in a place that does not facilitate any kind of real personal growth. If you've got demons, both literal and figurative, Kirkwall is going to basically prey on that. So then we see this slow corruption of, a spirit versus a demon. A demon, according to Thetis, is a spirit that has felt corruption. So then we have Justice, which is a spirit and a virtue, suddenly completely drowning in this gray area, which is corruption. And it slowly but surely turns him into vengeance, which is a demon. And demonic possession, we all know how that goes. So eventually, he's always in his head, always talking, always yelling. When you romance him, Justice actually tries to basically break up Hawk and Anders, saying Hawk is just a distraction. That's one of the few things that Anders fought back against Justice about. But that is when you really see in his head, like, okay, they're very intricate. There is no line of separation. And this could have very drastic ramifications, which, again, we see. With each act, he becomes more and more somber and starts to lose a little bit more of his go-lucky attitude and jokester ways, and becomes more weighted by the responsibility of what he now knows he needs to do, which is blow up the Chantry, which is a symbol of everything wrong when it comes to mage and Templar relations. Because of that, there's some interesting foreshadowing that goes on. Now, keep in mind, it's been a couple of years since I played Dragon Age 2, so I may be off about this specific situation surrounding this thing. But what was interesting to me is that there was a moment where he was talking to Aveline. I had both of them in the party, and I believe they were at the docks or something. But she says, "Oh, Anders, I expected, fancy seeing you here. I expected to see Kirkwall burning by now," or something along the lines of the fact that he's this rebellious mage that always is going on about mage rights and fiery personality and rebellion, viva la yeah. And he doesn't retaliate with a joke. Instead, he very somberly, the words are joking, but the tone is not. And he says, "The day is still young." And of course, shortly after that is when the boom happens. But it's interesting because it's hard to do subtleties in games. Not saying it's impossible. Games do it all the time, but there's a trick to it. And you want to provide nuance, and you want to provide context and foreshadowing, but you want to do it in a way that doesn't spoil what you're leading up to. And the thing is there's so many hints throughout this game that you don't really recognize until you beat the game. And that's genius. So then when you go back and replay it, you're like, holy crap, how did I miss that? But I don't think I've ever met a person that was like, yep, I called that. Anders blowing up the old Chantry. Nobody saw it coming. That's still to this day, a decade after launch, people are still talking about the shocking twist of Anders' rebellion, which then, of course, kickstarted the events of Dragon Age Inquisition. But it's very, very interesting because that, to me, it wasn't a immediate pivot. It was a slow descent into this sober nature of knowing if I got to put my money where my mouth is, and I don't think I'm going to come out alive on the other end. And then that's also when you see when he does the deed and Hawk can execute him, which I've done and not done in various playthroughs. He doesn't fight back. He knows he deserves it, but he also knew that it was worth it because there can be no compromise. And that's a heavy moment. That's a heavy moment that does not get the credit it deserves. And I really like, and going back, I know I keep referencing Fenris. He's like my baby, my broody elf for days. I will defend him with my life. But, for me, the interactions between Fenris and Anders is probably one of the most important ones, and a big reason why I love having them in the party. And if recommending Dragon Age 2 to a person playing for the first time, I definitely recommend on those non-mage missions, don't bring Fenris on those, have them together, because the tit for tat is very interesting. And it shows, during Act 2 especially, there's two paths. You have Anders and you have Fenris. And there's a fork in the road of healing and growth or descent. And there is a conversation that happens between Anders and Fenris where Fenris misspeaks. He's talking about, why mages need to be controlled. Though he tailors it later in the game and be like, okay, I was wrong. Not all mages are evil. Let's compromise. At the very beginning of the game, he was not like that. And he misspeaks. Anders gets his feathers in a ruffle, literally. He's got the feathers. And Fenris apologizes. He goes, I misspoke. That was not my intention. I'm basically says, for all intents and purposes, I'm worried about you. I see you. Now we see Fenris, who has undergone this journey of vengeance against his master, and realizes once he finally gets his vengeance, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. He's going through this growth of who am I without that? And he's at that pivotal moment where he makes that decision to, do I let this drag me down or do I become better? And he does. And it's in that moment where Anders doesn't. He doesn't take the apology. He bites back even further, which for me is a very pivotal moment where you see them both. They have this parallel story, again, both very, very oppressed, both beaten, both very hurt by people because society said it was okay to hurt them. And pretty much their entire journey, though different, was very parallel with each other. And this was a moment where you saw them go in completely different directions. And I feel like they have so much in common because Fenris can see himself in Anders can see himself in Fenris. Neither wants to admit it because nobody likes to be confronted with the uglier parts of their personality. But the thing is Fenris doesn't have justice. And Fenris also learns to rely on Hawk and the friends he's made. And Isabella, him and Isabella get a really close relationship. Whether you romance him or not, Isabella is tied to him in every single which way. I have dogs. Sorry. I've recorded this like 5 times, so I refuse to do it a 6th time. So we're writing this out together, folks. Yes. Okay, looks like they're done. So anyway, so I felt like that was a really big turning point with them, as, Fenris could see this moment. And I think Anders could see it too, but he wasn't willing to admit it. And that was really the big turning point where Fenris could see how wrong he could have gone. And Anders could see that light of how good he could have gone. But then you've got Justice in his ear saying that's selfish. And you can't put your needs in front of the needs of you may have escaped, but there's thousands of mages going through what you went through. You can't let that color. You can't let yourself be distracted from this mission. And it's those complexities, those moral complexities that make Dragon Age 2 so great, because not only do they do those complexities, they have those throughout the entire narrative, but they do them well. There are so many moments in Dragon Age 2 that were gut punching. There were so many hilarious moments where you were dying laughing. There were moments where you're like, oh my God. And then you have the moments like Leandra's death, where she's butchered and then brought back to life from horrendous blood magic, which again carries the theme among something that tailors all of these characters together. And it's just that's when you see Dragon Age's strength. Dragon Age 2's strength is not necessarily in the gameplay mechanics itself. Dragon Age 2's mechanics and strength and love and passion and unique entry into the world of video games, its truest strength is its characters. And I think that's why Dragon Age will always be a hill I'm willing to die on, and Dragon Age 2 is always a hill I'm willing to die on, because I know what the stigma is against it, and it's correct. There are a lot of things wrong mechanically with Dragon Age 2. I wish they would have spent more time on it. I wish they would have been given the freedom to really put as much time and effort into every location. And I feel like if they would have done that, it would have gotten a lot better reception, because the story was incredible, the progression was incredible, the combat was balanced, the party system was balanced, the characters were incredible, the romance was fulfilling. It's not, a lot of people that don't care about romance in games, they like to make fun of, well, I don't need that, I bang real people. Well, I'm married. But the thing is people that like story, they like these tales, they like narratives, they want to be immersed, they want to lose themselves in these moments. And because of that, that's where this shines. And the romance is another way of doing it. And there's a lot of games that throw romance in there almost as an afterthought. And it's like, wow, this does nothing to enrich the story at all. Dragon Age Mass Effect's not like that. It's the complete opposite. Like, it makes it to where when you're done with the game, you feel like you're leaving home for the first time. And that's why for me, I have so many playthroughs, it is like coming home. And, one of the things that I really feel like Dragon Age 2 doesn't get enough credit for is its incredible characters, its arcs, how they progress, and how they flawlessly progress in other media as well, which is why it's got one of the biggest fan fiction communities online, because there is so much material there to work with. The comics flow effortlessly with the games. The books flow effortlessly with the games without being dependent on it, which is nice. That's a hard balance to do, and I think that Dragon Age 2 deserves a lot more than it gets. I will also always defend Fenris with my life. He is not the angry jerk that a lot of people like to paint him as, and I feel like if that was your only takeaway of that character, then you weren't paying attention, and I would definitely recommend playing again, because there is clearly a lot you missed, because there's a difference between that character didn't resonate with me versus just not understanding a character at all. And for me, especially if you like a studio and you feel yourself being like, wow, I don't. That's fine. But give yourself some credit and give the studio some credit and see if maybe there's an internal shift that needs to happen. Sometimes there are just bad games. And then sometimes there's just games that you weren't in the space to understand it and enjoy it for what it was. And I feel like there are going to be people that don't like Dragon Age 2 no matter what, and that's valid. But from personal conversations I've heard and witnessed and dealt with, a lot of that stigma comes from just not understanding the game and what it offers, and being able to strip away that mechanical issue, because it was broken, but peeling that away, there's so many more layers to it that get ignored and kind of pushed to the side. So hopefully this long ranty video did something other than make you hate my guts. I'm already projecting getting a lot of hateful comments on Twitter and here and Facebook, and that's fine. This is something that I have a lot of conversations with about people, because it's something that is very interesting to me of where that break in game development and narrative design, how sometimes they can be each other's worst enemies, and that I feel like is definitely the case with Dragon Age 2. So without further ado, thank you guys for joining me on this way-winded rant and messy video, considering it's a couple cuts into one. I am still learning video, so thank you very much for, bearing with me on this journey of video discovery. And we will have more professional looking videos here soon. We're going to be ramping up video production on Prima. We're going to be doing a streaming. I don't know if you guys caught, but I was streaming about 5 hours of The Forest last night. We beat the game. Damn it, Timmy. And we're going to be having a lot more cool stuff on the horizon, in terms of not just articles that you see on the website, but also video content, video creation, engagement, things like that. So thank you guys for tuning in very much. Like, seriously, this is awesome to be able to talk about this kind of stuff. Feel free to reach out in the comment section below, or you can hit me up personally on Twitter at DIRTYEFFINHIPPY, which is my gamer tag for everything. Feel free to reach me out to there and tell me I'm wrong, or tell me I'm right, or I don't know, something witty that I can't think of right now because I'm not nearly as funny as I think I am. So, but yeah, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. And yeah, that's pretty much my Dragon Age 2 rant for the day. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.